Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Transit Talks. This is kind of our first rodeo with doing this live stream format. Everyone's kind of impacted by the coronavirus. We wish we could see everyone in person, but we figured we'd want to join online and reach out to everyone and engage with the community and talk about a few key topics as well as take everyone's questions. So if you do have any questions or do want to take part, just leave a comment either on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you're watching, and we'll be able to respond. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the other people who will be taking part in this. And let's see here. So first off, we will go with Ryan Campbell. He is a again, sorry, this is our first time kind of doing this. So we'll go. So Ryan Campbell's there. Linda Bell, she's in charge of our stakeholder outreach and some of our political outreach. Ryan Campbell is in charge of our engagement and volunteer team. And then we also have Jason Lathberry, who is in charge of our policy and research. And so with that, let's see here. So with that, we'll get started. Here's our agenda. Some of our agenda items are, we'll do a quick intro, which we just went through. We'll go through some Cobb for Transit news and updates. What are we doing? How are we trying to bring better transit here to Cobb County? Jason will kind of walk us through the impact of the coronavirus on our local transit. Linda will talk us through the election results. We all know that we had an election yesterday, a primary, and just what are the impacts there, when it comes to transit here locally. And then Ryan will walk us through how to get more involved. At any point, we do have a Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. We'll stop during this this conversation and go to some of those questions. And at the end, we do want to kind of have an open conversation. And again, if you do have any comments or questions, just leave a question in either on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be sure to get to you. So without further, without any more introduction. Let's walk you through a little bit about what we're doing lately. So we are probably a team of about 20 volunteers, and we're accomplishing a lot for, we just started last year, summer of 2019. And some of our most recent accomplishments are we were involved in the Smyrna Connects Transit Study. We had featured articles in both the Marietta Daily Journal and Curb, which got us a lot of really great exposure, and some people heard about us for the first time. We just reached our 1,000 combined followers across email subscriptions and social media. And events are on hold right now, but we're moving them all online. So, so this is our first online event, and we'll, hopefully we'll be able to get through this pretty successfully. And if there's any hiccups or whatever, we'll improve and just keep doing better with it. Some of our upcoming initiatives, we are currently working on a bus stop assessment study. That's some of the very near and dear to our hearts as far as something that we can improve with transit right now. We're not too happy with the status of bus stops around the county, and we think there's a big opportunity for improvement to make it more comfortable for transit riders. We are working on our Cobb 22 vision. That is what we want to see in the upcoming referendum. We are continuing our Smyrna advocacy and trying to make sure that what came out of that study actually winds up happening, and and we start seeing some results from that. We will be launching our membership and supporters programs. That way people can get more involved. And also we'll be launching our Transit Champions Advocacy Program. So we want to create a whole network of advocates around the county. That way it's not just us telling the story about better transit, but we're actually educating and encouraging other people to get involved in their community to advocate for better transit. So that's kind of the quick, what we're currently doing and working on. We're constantly looking at new projects to do, and hopefully we'll, if you're interested in joining in, we're more than happy to have you help us out. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, let us know. Our email is team@cobbfortransit.org. And so we will go to the next step, which is kind of the impact of the coronavirus on local transit. And I'm currently looking to see if there's any questions related to our organization. Right now, I don't really see any related questions about the organization right now, but if you do have any questions, just feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to answer them. So Jason, I'll kind of hand it over to you, and you can discuss some of the impacts of the coronavirus.
All right, thanks, Matt. So, as shouldn't be terribly surprising, coronavirus has impacted transit pretty widely across the board, not just here within the Atlanta metro, but all across the nation. Uh, so far, MARTA has seen a 75% reduction in rail ridership, up to 80% in some cases, and a 40 to 50% reduction in bus ridership, kind of depending on what month you're looking at. Greta Express has been one of the hardest hit with a 94% reduction in ridership. And we know that Cobb has not been spared, with the early numbers showing a 20 to 30% reduction, but we don't have detailed numbers as of right now. We're still waiting for some of the previous month's ridership data to come in. So the reason that Greta got so far reduced compared to everybody else is that the hardest hit were the kind of white collar, very commuter oriented jobs that were easiest to be able to work from home, which is really what Greta was very kind of their core ridership. And indeed, a lot of MARTA's rail ridership was very focused on that, whereas MARTA's bus ridership and indeed Cobb's bus ridership are very focused on essential workers, uh, people who don't have the option or opportunity to work from home. So while their impacts were still quite intense, they were not nearly as bad as the more commuter and choice rider focused areas. Next slide, please. So, in response to not only the virus itself, but also the adjustments in ridership, the various transit agencies responded. Cobb Link has actually made relatively small bus service adjustments compared to other agencies. Cobb Link combined its two Cumberland circulators into a single route with reduced frequencies. It reduced its express bus services, and it created an opportunity for Rapid 10 buses to basically become standard Route 10 buses, depending on what kind of ridership that singular bus was experiencing at the time. And they've also introduced rear door boarding just to kind of help prevent crowding during the boarding process and near the drivers. By comparison, MARTA reduced service to only 41 essential bus routes. These 41 bus routes received stark increases in frequencies to help with crowding and general ridership. These 41 bus routes were kind of targeted to be the highest use bus routes, as well as ones that served what were considered essential services, such as healthcare facilities, such as manufacturing facilities and logistics facilities across the MARTA service area. Rail service was reduced to weekend levels for all week, but crowding on the trains is not nearly as bad as on those previously mentioned bus routes, and so that's why the frequencies were reduced there. Greta, similar to how it had the highest ridership decline, had the highest service cut with about 65% service cuts across the network in response to its loss of ridership. Next slide, please. So, some good news. The CARES Act from the federal government did include a provision for $25 billion going to transit agency relief. Georgia received $522 million of that, with Metro Atlanta then receiving $371 million, and Cobb received $18 million out of that. And that money is generally free use, with the idea that agencies are allowed the flexibility to apply that money as needed, as their individual circumstances need. So, for example, MARTA is using it to help pad out operations budgets, as well as cover new expenses having to deal with purchasing personal protective equipment for its employees. And Cobb is going to be doing much the same, with kind of closing out budget shortfalls and budget holes from the loss of ridership. Next slide, please. Yep. So, despite everything, transit is still generally safe. The agencies have responded rather well to at least cleaning and routinely cleaning both buses and trains. Employees have been given personal protective equipment and reassigned to prioritize facilities cleaning and sterilization. Spacing policies have been implemented pretty much on every agency, trying to space out riders and prevent crowding. And so far, we've seen little to no evidence that transit riders themselves are at a higher risk than the general population, specifically for riding transit. Basically, we've seen little to no evidence that riding transit itself is a key factor in a rider getting sick or not. What we have seen is that people who are riding transit are generally of populations who are more exposed in general. That is essential workers, people who are still out there on the front lines, who are still interacting with people and are generally higher risk, but not from transit itself. So because of that, we still encourage everybody to please still use self-protection, please use masks, please follow social distancing, and please routinely wash your hands and use hand sanitizer. Next slide, please.
So yeah, so that kind of covers, thank you, Jason, for kind of walking us through, some of the impacts of coronavirus. If anyone does have any questions about the coronavirus and the impacts on transit, basically what we see is, yes, there is a temporary impact. We don't know what those long-term impacts are, but we definitely want to make sure that, any cuts or impacts are as short-term as possible. There's a lot of, scare tactics, I guess is the best way to put it, that's going out there. People saying, oh, well, this just shows that transit's bad and this is going to kill transit forever and things like that. And we completely disagree with that. We think transit does have a long-term need in our communities. And, we advocate that things get back to normal as quickly as possible for whatever cuts that have been made. So hopefully we get, our world kind of recovers and we get back to kind of normal operations here in the near future. And, and everyone, whoever's lost their job is going back to their jobs. And most of all, everyone stays healthy. So that's kind of what we're seeing. If you have any questions about coronavirus, and the impact of coronavirus on transit, again, feel free to ask just by leaving a comment on either Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get to that. But with that, we will go to the next step, which will be Linda discussing the election impacts from yesterday.
Good evening to you guys and to everybody who's watching us. As Matt said, I am Linda Bell, and I work mainly with the stakeholder outreach for our organization. Cobb for Transit is a grassroots advocacy group, but we recognize that the ultimate decisions that will be made about transit will be made by elected officials. So therefore, it's important to us that transit champions are elected. So the composition of our Cobb County Board of Commissioners is critical because we hope that we're going to see a transit referendum put forward by the Board of Commissioners in 2022. In November, this November, there will be elections for District 2 and District 4 commissioners, as well as for the chair of the Board of Commissioners. Some of us with Cobb for Transit interviewed almost all the candidates for District 4, and we posted on our Facebook page summaries of each of their positions on transit. So we hope that you took a look at that before. And yesterday were the primary elections that were held. As most of you probably know, there were issues with voting, long lines, technology problems, but I think we can pretty much say what the results are of the elections. There were 7 people running in the Democratic primary for District 4. There were no Republicans running. And it was almost a given that there would be a runoff because there were so many people running. And the two candidates with the most votes are Sheila Edwards and Monique Sheffield. And again, we did interview them before, so I encourage you to look at our summaries of their positions on our Facebook page about transit. For District 2, Jerica Richardson is without opposition for the Democratic ballot. And the Republicans, looks like it will be a runoff between Fitz Johnson and either Andy Smith or Kevin Nichols. The last time I looked at that, there was only like a 40 vote difference between them. So I don't know if there'll be a recount there. So it was pretty close, but it looked like for sure Fitz Johnson would be in the runoff. For chair, Lisa Cupid is running as the Democrat. She had no opposition yesterday, and Mike Boyce succeeded in his race for the Republican ballot. So we plan to be interviewing the District 2 and the chair candidates. You can look for that on our Facebook page as well. And the runoffs will be on August 11th. And we would encourage you, especially in light of some of the problems yesterday, that you might want to apply for absentee ballots for that. We're also interested in the Georgia House and Senate races. A major impediment to state funding of transit in Georgia is the fact that all of our gas taxes currently are dedicated to roads and bridges. They have to be spent on that. And we, of course, would like to see that expanded to transit. There was a bill that was actually put forward this year in the Georgia legislature to do that. And while it is not likely that it's going to go anywhere this year, we hope that the election of more transit champions could change that in the future. In Cobb County alone, there'll be about 5 Georgia Senate races and about 11 House races. So please continue to follow us on Facebook as we find out more about where all the candidates stand on transit expansion. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Linda. And, thank you for going through that. And I think that, with all the problems that happened, especially in South Cobb yesterday, there are a lot of questions as far as, the procedures and the technology being used. And hopefully we're able to iron a lot of that out before November or even the runoff, come August. And it looks like the runoff will be August 11th, 2020. And that runoff will apply to both District 2 and District 4. So District 2, if you applied for a Republican ballot, and District 4, if you are in District 4 and voted in the Democratic ballot this, in this past election. So very important runoff races there. And, it's the commissioners are probably the most important people when it comes to, our transit future here in the county. They're the ones who set the budget. So they're the ones who, if we do get a referendum, they'll be the ones that push forward that referendum, and they dictate and set that policy and strategy moving forward for the county. So with that, if there's any questions about the elections, feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to answer them. And we will probably move forward going to the Smyrna, the Smyrna study recap. So the Smyrna study, just for a little bit of background, came out a couple of weeks ago. You can go to this link down here, the Facebook watch. On Facebook, if you just look up Smyrna Connects, you'll be able to view that video. It's about a 12-minute video, and they walk through all of the different proposals. I'll walk through kind of some of them here in the near future, just to kind of paint that vision of what they were showing as far as the next 20 years. And they broke out all the projects into short term, which is next 2 years, midterm, which is between 2023 and 2029, and then long term, which is between 2030 and 2040. So we kind of see what the study is recommending Smyrna to do, and overall we loved it. If we were to give it an A to F school type grade, it would be an A minus. And that's might be even a little harsh, but there were some glaring. Not glaring, but there are a lot of improvements that we would have liked to have seen. The most glaring of which, of course, is the lack of rail. And the way we look at it is whether, we know rail is an expensive option in some cases. We do think there's some cheaper alternatives. We're actually doing a vision for rail to try to knock away some of those myths about rail being too expensive and not the right option for the county. But for the next 20 years, we do think that there is an opportunity where Smyrna, being the connection between Cobb County and the rest of the Atlanta region, is going to be prime and ready for rail. And so if we're looking out to, a transit study and a transit vision for 20 years, at some point in that 20-year scope, a full generation, we're going to be ready for rail transit. And, so we just thought that was a little lacking and one of the biggest omissions. But overall, we thought there was a lot of great things. And, just to kind of go through the highlights real fast, there's a lot of increased coverage, a lot more new routes across all types of forms, whether it's, local circulators, local bus routes, express bus routes, bus rapid transit. Overall, Smyrna would see a significant increase in coverage. There was some focus on frequency, including making a couple of existing routes more frequent in the near future. We thought that was important, but we also thought that there's opportunity for even more high frequency routes and a focus on frequency. The goal, the bare minimum of all frequency should be 15 minutes or less. And, because people don't want to wait at a bus stop for longer than that, or else they'll just get in a car and drive if they can. So for people to actually choose to take transit, we want that wait time at a bus stop to be less than 15 minutes, preferably 10. So that's always kind of the bare minimum of expectation. And if you look at a lot of Cobb Links routes currently, they're 30 minutes, 1 hour, things like that. Let's just be honest. If you can choose to take a car, you're going to take a car instead of waiting at the bus stop for 45 minutes. So we wanted a little bit more of a focus on those high frequency routes. There was some mention of improved bus stops in the presentation. That was really good to see. And we thought that there's an even greater opportunity to set the standard. And this is probably coming in the future, but we're advocating for it now. But what does a good bus stop look like? And how can we get the community more involved in maybe like an adopt a stop program or something like that? So we see, as great as it was to see that included, we think there's opportunity to give even more detail and be even more visionary when it comes to what those bus stops look like. There was starting of marketing campaigns. That's very important. I'm a marketer by trade, and in every industry, marketing is super important, both to attract new customers, in this case, it would be transit riders, and also to retain your transit riders. In every industry, you see marketing almost. But in transit's having to compete against, cars and a way of life that billions of dollars are being spent on that marketing, and yet, Cobb Link spends currently $0 in marketing. And that we wonder why ridership continues to fall and why there's a lack of new riders and things like that. And part of it is because there isn't a budget for marketing. And for a successful transit system, there does need to be that support and some of that public advocacy to make sure that people do know the people are aware of what's out there and they're willing to use it. Another great thing was that they were looking at hiring a full-time transit advocate. This is in a few years. With how complex all the transit relationships are, that's a very important role. I just started getting into the industry last year, talking to people, and there are so many different agencies, so many different planners, so many different oversight committees, things like that, that it's that you need somebody just fully dedicated in order to kind of champion Smyrna and make sure they get all the federal funding and grants and they're competitive when it comes to going after those. And another great thing is there was a lot of really good projects as far as efficiency improvements, things like bus-only routes or bypass lanes or signal priority, things like that aren't as sexy as you would think, or it's not a new route, it's not a new technology, but what you're seeing it be like that those existing routes are able to show up on time better, they're more reliable, and it's a better experience for the riders. So that's important, and we were very happy to see that. As far as suggested improvements, of course, I did mention the rail. Again, 20 years out, we think there's a huge opportunity. We would like to see it even sooner. I personally would love to be able to catch rail from Cumberland or Smyrna and take that downtown Atlanta, to Atlanta United game. And it's definitely lacking. We definitely see that there's a need for it. And although there are costs, we think there's opportunities for us to achieve what we're trying to do. We also are advocating for a mobility advisory committee. We have spoken with the mayor and some members of the city council, and they have been very favorable to that idea. So I think it's only a matter of time that we'll see a lot of these suggestions and stuff and not just for transit, but for biking, pedestrians, scooters or microtransit, ride-hailing services, all of those things. A lot of our towns and cities are built around the automobile and the car. And we think that having a mobility advisory committee would make it very clear for Smyrna to start taking in some of these other modes of transit, such as pedestrians, biking, and of course, transit. And then again, a greater focus on the high frequency routes, even more marketing and branding. If we really want to take that next step, there should just be a whole rebranding of some of the Smyrna routes. Call it the Jonquil route. Call it the Brave shuttle or some type of co-branding there. Things like that will increase ridership and attract more choice riders to the transit system. I did mention the better bus stops and what does that mean earlier, and then more community involvement. Get buy-in from the business community. Get buy-in from other nonprofits. Have people engage with riders and have them kind of own their routes, or be representatives for the routes, and make it to where people have some ownership in the transit system that they ride. And you'll start seeing that have great impacts down the road, and it be more successful. So that's kind of our highlights and suggested improvements. Let's see if there's kind of any questions. So no current questions related to the Smyrna study. I'm going to kind of walk through just a couple of the maps. So you see short-term, mid-term, and long-term is kind of how it broke out. And you can kind of see here, some of the maps. Short-term is really not a lot of new routes. It's more marketing, the bus stops, and a little bit of microtransit. Midterm, you start seeing some new routes being put in there, including the circulators, the connects, which is the downtown Smyrna to Atlanta Express route, which would go down up and down Atlanta Road, and then also the Airport Express. Long-term is where you see the South Cobb BRT. You see the top end BRT all the way down to South Cobb Drive. You see the Connect Cobb BRT, which is going up and down 41 all the way to downtown. And you see a few other routes and other opportunities, including increasing the frequency of the local circulators to 15 minutes, which is super important because people, again, won't want to wait much longer. So there's some of the maps, and then the link to the video that goes over this and where we got these screen captures from, you can see there is in the bottom right. And again, if you just go to the Smyrna Connect study on Facebook or look at smyrnaconnects.com, you'll see that link. And then finally, we do have our the list of all of the projects here, and we kind of broke it out as far as what jurisdiction they're in, what time frame it's in, what category it's in, what mode of transit is it focused on, our opinion, and then just kind of some detailed thoughts. I know that's a lot there. It's not something that we're all going to be able to look at right now and go over, but I do have a link there for everyone to go see. And if you have any questions or want to discuss it with us, by all means, feel free to contact us. And we'd love to have those conversations and figure out. One of the key things that we're looking to do after this study is create a Smyrna-focused advocacy group, just focus on Smyrna. So I know we're Cobb for Transit, but we're launching Smyrna for Transit as well. And if you want to be a part of that, please, let us know. Email us at team@cobbfortransit.org, and we'll get you in touch with the right people, and you're able to join that group. All right. With that, are there any questions about the Smyrna or any questions about anything else that we've discussed here in the past? So I see. Let's see. So Jenny, let's see. Jenny asked, "What are the main goals of this group? How does one volunteer to help to get transit to have more attention in Cobb?" So that's a great question, Jenny. And I think Ryan, you'll kind of be able to provide that answer. And actually, with that, I'll just hand it over to you, and you can discuss kind of volunteering for Cobb for Transit. Why is that important? And also just how someone can get more involved.
Yeah, so of course, when we're trying to build coalitions and build out and have a conversation about transit, of course, you need partners, you need people in different areas of Cobb in order, to really bring things to fruition. So of course, we have our website, cobbfortransit.org, or you can email at team@cobbfortransit.org. And what that's going to allow us to do is to get connected. So of course, with the ongoing pandemic and everything that's going on, we currently can't have in-person live events, but we've had them before and we plan on having them again. And this allows us to network and to connect with more people. And you can also become a membership supporter very soon. That's something that we're working on. And we're also working on building out content on our social media page, doing more interactive things like this so people can engage with us, ask questions, see what's happening in terms of the transit community and the discussions that are going on. So here's where we pretty much need help. So public outreach, stakeholder outreach, fundraising, events and programming, engagement, and research and planning. So pretty much wherever you feel comfortable, there's a place here for you at Cobb for Transit, right? So we're trying to leverage people's unique abilities and talents in order to grow the conversation around transit, in order so that we can have real progress on the transportation front, and so that we can see the transit alternatives and options that we're really fighting for.
That's great, Ryan, and thank you for that. And again, we are a volunteer-led organization, and everything we do is on the backs of our volunteers. And the things that we've accomplished just from our dedicated people who are passionate and really want to see better transit, it's been amazing to see. And so, and it's a very diverse group, young, old, every race, every background, every part of Cobb County. I'm personally in West Cobb. We have a lot of people in Smyrna, a lot of people in East Cobb. It's just really great to bring everyone together of all of our different backgrounds and kind of come together. And we know that it's a big fight ahead of us, but we're just getting started, and we already see the impacts we're making. And it's really great to see. And we're always, we're looking for more volunteers to join. And we're constantly just trying to make it fun. One of our last events before the coronavirus kind of impacted the world we live in, well, we met at a brewery, and and a ticket came with a free beer. So things like that, just to get more engaged in the community, have a good time. We're constantly going out to the different festivals around here, and we just really want to have a good time while trying to make a difference in the world and something that we're passionate about. So we're always looking for people to join us, and and to do that, you can just simply email us at team@cobbfortransit.org, and that's just the easiest way to let us know. And we're working on different volunteer initiatives as well, and hopefully we'll launch that here in the near future. Let's see, there's another question here from Jenny. Let's show that real fast. So she asked, what is happening with transit in Gwinnett County? Is Cobb for Transit working with Gwinnett? So that's a great question, because yesterday the commissioners of Gwinnett actually met, and it seems like, just like Cobb, they have 5 commissioners, and they have a lot of deadlines coming up here in the next couple of weeks, actually in the next couple of days. And it seems like all 5 of them want something different in their transit. And it doesn't seem like they're going to come to a conclusion here in the next few days. But it's we'll see what happens. We do work a little bit with some of the people who are trying to push for better transit in Gwinnett, and hopefully with some additional public advocacy and some of the commissioners getting aligned with what they want to see, we're able to see a little bit more traction, and hopefully it comes to a ballot this November. We all know that they went to a ballot last March, in March of 2019, to try to push for a full penny transit tax. It failed, but the main reason why it failed was because it was a special election in March. And to be honest, if we try to do a transit referendum in Cobb County in March, it will fail. It doesn't matter what the details are. It doesn't matter what it needs to be a general election. And my opinion is, if they put the exact same referendum and the exact same proposal on the ballot this November, it would wind up passing. But the timing was off, and hopefully they're able to come to a resolution and figure it out from there. So that's kind of what's happening with Gwinnett. I think we kind of want to see what happens, because as Gwinnett goes, Cobb County kind of goes too. We're very, it's very similar type of county, suburban, held back transit for so long. And, and hopefully we have a better future and more regional transit connections in the near future. And that sales tax will be very helpful. Jason, did I miss anything with that? I'll have you hop on real fast and see if you have anything to add to that.
Right. So what Gwinnett is working on right now is basically they have a large list of potential transit projects, ranging anywhere from a large implementation of on-demand rideshare to bus rapid transit routes to general high-frequency bus routes to heavy rail running along the I-85 corridor to express routes running out to Athens. They have a whole host of projects. And right now, what they're trying to do is select from these projects what to put on the ballot. And so the disagreement comes primarily from the specifics of these projects. The way the state law is set up is that the county can only operate rail transit if it has MARTA operating the transit. So if the county chooses to go with the heavy rail options, it either has to join MARTA or it has to contract with MARTA to do that implementation. If the county decides not to go with rail at all, it's relatively free to do anything it wants on its own other than rail. The of course, caveat to that being that they'll lose the kind of streamlining opportunities to integrate with the existing MARTA network, primarily in cross-county routes going into Fulton, DeKalb, and back out to Gwinnett. So right now, the commissioners, as Matt said, are split basically 5 different ways on the projects. We have one commissioner who doesn't want to have a transit vote at all, and he's been purposefully not attending any meetings. We have a commissioner who believes that the March referendum last year was a testament that the county doesn't want to join MARTA, which we strongly disagree with due to the low turnout. Literally 17% turnout compared to the 64% during a midterm or a 70% during a general election. And even then, the turnout was the closest that Gwinnett has ever gotten to joining MARTA in the history of these votes. We have a commissioner who believes that the project list needs to be significantly different to differentiate itself from the previously failed referendum, and to do that means to drop the heavy rail component and thus not join MARTA. We have one commissioner who wants to join MARTA, which is what we really wish will happen, and we have another commissioner who doesn't care so much if the county joins MARTA, but really wants to have the heavy rail component, and so would be okay with just contracting MARTA. So everything's kind of all over the place. And the commissioners have not run out of time yet. They still do have time to negotiate amongst themselves and to come up with a common plan. The question is just going to be what will that common plan look like? And so, as Matt said, we're kind of doing our best to offer our support to the groups who are working with Gwinnett, are working in Gwinnett. But as of right now, it's still going to be ultimately up to the commissioners.
Yep. Thank you, Jason. Yeah. So I think, and again, it's almost like Gwinnett. What happens in Gwinnett almost happens in Cobb a year or two later. So it's not really a competitive environment, but it is one of those things where if Gwinnett passes the right thing, we can kind of point and be like, "Hey, Cobb, look, Gwinnett's a year ahead of us. Let's get our act together." And so we are kind of. They're kind of like a brother to us in a way, and we're supportive of their transit expansion, and we just want to see better transit in the Atlanta region in general. And so hopefully they're able to put the right referendum on the ballot in November and get it passed, and we're able to start that process there in Gwinnett, and hopefully we're then able to follow that here in Cobb. So thank you for that question, Jenny. I see that you just did another question, and great question, by the way. If anyone else does have any other questions to ask, again, please just leave a comment on Facebook or YouTube. We're able to see it and present it and then provide an answer to it as well. So we love the participation and the engagement, and we want you to be involved as well in these conversations. So Jenny asked, can you talk about the huge expansion along I-285 that is in the works? Is there any plan for transit? How can we push to make sure there's transit being considered in the planning? Great question. And it's one of those, so the state of Georgia, using the gas fuel tax, is putting upwards of about $2 billion in these projects around 285 to add these toll lanes. And I'm personally not a fan of the toll lanes because to me it's not equitable for lower income people. It basically allows people who have money to pay to then bypass regular people who are stuck in traffic. So if we're looking at transit as a way to give people more opportunity and even the playing field, that's not the right way to go about it. And also there's a question for how much does it actually improve traffic. So unfortunately, the state is continuing to pay more money to build more lanes. Now, the one benefit of this is that those limited the term is the limited connected lanes. In other words, not everyone can ride it. Well, BRT routes can actually utilize it. So you'll see a top end to a BRT line along that 285 corridor. Hopefully it'll go down to South Cobb Drive in Smyrna, and that will be able to connect the top end to, whether it's Dorville, Medical Center, MARTA Station, up 400. You'll start seeing a lot more BRT trunk lines being built on the top end. So there is a benefit to transit in that, but with all of that money being spent for more roads, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a flesh wound. And, we just don't think that's the best long-term solution for, to improve mobility. But yeah, I think it's so far along in the project that it's going to happen. At this point, we just want to make sure that the connections for transit are successful, whether that's to Cumberland or South Cobb Drive or Smyrna. And we just want to make sure that transit is considered and integrated with all of those plans and the rest of the project. Any other questions out there, either on Facebook or YouTube? We've got a few minutes here left that we can discuss and have a conversation, and want to open it up to to everyone to participate. Let's see, Linda, I want to ask you real fast as far as I know you're involved with the Sierra Club. Where do you see as far as how better transit in Cobb, how that better impacts the environment, and and where some of the benefits are with that?
Well, we know that right now transportation is the single largest contributor to greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide in the air. It used to be the energy sector, and folks have been working hard on getting rid of coal plants, and that has helped. So that's no longer the largest contributor. It is transportation. And so when we look at trying to improve that, obviously having more people ride different transit options is much better than everybody being in their single car for the environment. Of course, it's better for a lot of reasons, just the traffic headaches that we all have. But for the environment in particular, that's my main concern, is that this is such a huge area that we need to be looking at and figuring out how to improve this for the future. I wanted to mention one thing you talked about. Jenny asked about the 285 lanes. And Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that DOT has no plans for BRT, bus rapid transit on those lanes. And if it happens, it's up to the cities to make sure that it happens, and they have to provide the stops and the different bus stations and all of that. I don't think it's in DOT's planning. Is that right, Jason?
Right. So the way Georgia Department of Transportation, the way they receive a lot of their funding is through the motor fuels tax. And per a Georgia state constitutional amendment, the motor fuels tax can only be spent on road and bridge projects. Now, legally speaking, that means that the motor fuel tax can be spent on transit efforts as long as they are within the road or on a bridge, basically. Unfortunately, the way that the amendment has been generally interpreted and is continually interpreted by the legislation, or excuse me, by the legislature and the General Assembly, is that the motor fuel tax can only be used on road and bridge projects primarily for cars. Now, we know that there are legal abilities to use the money otherwise. GDOT rather routinely includes things like bike lanes or sidewalks or pedestrian crossings or various street furniture amenities, even sometimes bus shelter facilities along its project routes. But these are very isolated, and so there's no larger transit spending component or thought that goes into GDOT's projects. And indeed, the General Assembly would likely shoot down any projects that attempted to do so. In part, this is an education issue. In part, this is a deliberate issue on the part of the state to limit how it uses its funds and how GDOT operates. What that means for the hot lanes is that GDOT and CERTA, so the State Roads and Tolls Authority, neither one have been given the legal authority to spend hot lane money for these toll lanes on transit planning or transit efforts, which means that as of right now, transit is primarily a secondary consideration. In fact, secondary would be giving it a bit of a boost. The general answer that we hear is that, of course, the hot lanes will be useful for transit. As of right now, the hot lanes on I-85, on I-75, both north and south, are used for the Greta Express buses and to great effect for those express buses. But what we're looking for is something better than the Greta Express buses. Certainly, we want an expansion of the commuter bus system. It has been a very successful program, and we love to see it expand and grow. But the traffic and congestion and mobility needs of the top end corridor is such that we need high capacity transit, operates frequently, moves lots of people. And as of right now, all of the transit planning that goes into anything more than commuter buses is going to be relegated onto a third party. What that third party ends up being, we don't know yet. The current coalition is between Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb County, and the respective cities within them, as well as CIDs. It's a somewhat patchwork coalition that's doing the study efforts, but their study efforts are unfortunately somewhat isolated and quite independent from the design efforts and the construction efforts that GDOT and CERTA are undergoing. What this will mean in practice is that the hot lanes will probably be built first. They will probably be built with little to no consideration for bus rapid transit at all. And assuming the coalition can assemble the funding, the bus rapid transit efforts will need to be retrofitted onto the lanes, which will ultimately make the project more expensive. It'll probably degrade the quality of the project. We do have concerns about bus stop accessibilities along some of the aerial sections that they're designing. We do have concerns about the wider road network connections, as there have been discussions in the past about BRT not being able to use the entrance and exit ramps for the hot lanes to local surface streets, and that degrades the potential to integrate with existing transit centers. So it's an ongoing effort. It's one that we are part of the conversation on, and other transit activists in the region are part of the conversation on. So it's something that we're working on. And trying to get I-285 top end right will hopefully set the stage for future efforts. We're seeing kind of an emerging network coming around and forming around 285 in multiple bus routes and multiple bus rapid transit routes. And we're hoping that if we can get I-285 right, we can build off of that, and we can use it as a showcase for these other emerging bus routes around the perimeter as well.
Great points, Jason. And yeah, and I think our view of BRT, and that's bus rapid transit, is that it's not the end all be all, but if done right, it's a very, very good mode of transit. And, for it to be done right, it needs its own lanes. It needs very, very good, well integrated stations that are almost like rail. If we get to a point where it's the premium rail on wheels is what it's sometimes called, then I think it's a very good mode of transit across many of our corridors. Now we still need some, we believe we still need some rail around some corridors, but when it comes to the top end 285, if we're able to get, that BRT top end all the way down and also have it on the west wall down to the airport, we see that being a very beneficial mode of transit. So that's kind of our view of BRT, and we hope to see that be implemented in the right way in the near future. So a few more questions are trickling in, and that's really good to see. So the next question we'll go to is from Sean. She asked, on the Democratic primary ballot in Smyrna, there was a question asking whether MARTA should be extended into Cobb County. What are your thoughts on why this question was asked now? That's a very great question. And so there were two kind of transit or transportation related questions on the ballot if you selected the Democratic ballot here in the Cobb County primary. The first question was, do you support a full penny transportation tax? And then the second question was, do you support MARTA expansion into Cobb County? Those are both asked right now because we feel like a future, if transit ever does come to a referendum, and that transit referendum includes MARTA, we feel like the block of voters that will be most likely to vote for it are Democratic voters. And so we wanted to pose those two questions to those primary voters just to see where they stand and what those responses are. That way we could see where we are at when it comes to our advocacy and our education for the Cobb County voters. And the initial results were that MARTA was overwhelmingly supported. I believe last time I saw it, it was 87% voted yes for MARTA expansion off of that question. And the full penny transportation tax was a little bit more split. Last time I saw it, again, this wasn't all precincts reporting, was in the high 60s. And I think a part of that might be that the full penny transportation is just vague. I'm curious to know what the results would have been if it was full penny transit, if that would have changed some of the results. But it does show that when it comes to a ballot referendum, that any sales tax up to a full penny, we will need to do some strong advocacy and education on. So very revealing, and that's why we ask that now, because if we do go to a referendum in 2022, having that information and knowing what voters are actually thinking and saying is very important for the education advocacy that we do for the public. So that's why that was asked, and hopefully we're able to get some really good data and results from that. There's a couple of other questions that have come in. Let's see, Jenny asked, why does Smyrna not have bus service along Atlanta Road? How can we get service there, especially since city services are all along this major street? And that's a really great question. I think that's one of the corridors that is most lacking transit here in Cobb County. Why they don't. It can only be, you can only assume it's cost consideration so far, in the fact that the county hasn't supported that area, as well as Smyrna hasn't really, they've never supported transit on their own either yet. They did the study. They're now looking at ways that they can support more transit, and the Atlanta Road corridor was a significant part of the study as far as being a corridor that they do want high frequency transit on. So it's one of those things where I think it's a high priority for the future, and we just need to keep advocating for that. And hopefully we see a pretty significant bus stop downtown, as well as connections to Braves, and the Battery, the Cumberland area, to Marietta, as well as the downtown and the airport. So hopefully we start seeing that Smyrna downtown district be better connected to other areas in the region. And also, if we do that top end 285 BRT, hopefully then be able to take BRT from Smyrna over to Cumberland, and then even on over to the 400 corridor, and possibly even Gwinnett at some point. So that's how everything kind of ties together, and we hopefully see some of those changes here in the next few years. All right, let's see. Any other questions? All right, Jason, let's see what. Jason, if you have a couple of things you wanted to add, please do.
I did just want to expand a bit more on the Smyrna bus service answer. Like Matt said, we definitely support Smyrna's proposal to have bus service operating down Atlanta Road down into the city of Atlanta. MARTA actually has a bus transfer location down in the Bolton area, down near a lot of its kind of city utilities areas and one of the local clusters down there, and is currently planning on building a new transit center at that location to help facilitate those bus transfers. And anything coming from Smyrna down the Atlanta Road corridor, kind of down into Atlanta that direction, will certainly be able to make use of that transfer facility in the future. And so we're definitely looking at that corridor, and we are hoping to get some more service down that way, even more so than what Smyrna has already proposed. We have a kind of a personal project to look at operating additional service, running from all the way from Marietta down through Smyrna and then down that corridor as well. So we definitely think it's a corridor that needs more bus service and is woefully underserved right now.
Thank you, Jason. And so we have a couple more minutes left in the chat. We said it was 7 to 8 o'clock, and we don't want to keep everyone, away from the rest of their night. So a lot of great questions out there. If you have any additional questions, feel free to ask. And with that, I do want to kind of flip the tables and ask the, people who are watching us and participating a couple of questions as well. So we have a survey. And if you just go to that link, it's bit.ly/C4T Cobb for Transit event survey. And at that link, it's just a couple of, it's just to let us know that you're watching. Why do you want transit? If you want to join our and subscribe to some of our newsletters and get more information about some upcoming events, there's a chance for you to let us know that you're able to volunteer. And also just let us know why you do want better transit. And if you have any questions or suggestions or way to improve this event, let us know. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this, joining in. And actually, another question just came in. So that was really good to see. Sean just asked, does this group address pedestrian safety? So great question. And if you ask any of us, as much as we advocate for better transit is indirectly related to so many different other modes of mobility. You have pedestrians, you have bicycling, you have micromobility, you even have Uber and Lyft and all the ride hailing services. And for successful transit to work, you need it to be well integrated and well and well coordinated with those other modes of transit. When it comes to pedestrian safety, most of the way that people go from the bus stop to their homes or businesses is that last quarter mile or half mile. So if you look at a lot of the bus stops around in the county, some of them are placed in areas that don't have sidewalks, and it's just a pole in the ground. Well, that impacts every transit ridership, everybody who's getting involved, and everyone who's taking the bus. And we strongly advocate for better sidewalks, better pedestrian safety, better crosswalks. All of that is well integrated when it comes to transit safety and transit rider experience. So we don't directly, people don't directly think of pedestrian and transit being together, but in everything we do, we make sure that it's well tied out and thought of. And with that, it is 8 o'clock. We will wrap it up. And if there's any questions, feel free to email us at team@cobbfortransit.org. I would like to thank the other panelists who have joined us, Ryan Campbell, Linda Bell, and Jason Lathbury. And also Karen's kind of working behind the scenes, making sure that everything's flowing when it comes to the comments and everything. And everyone who participated, asked questions, took time of their day to watch us. Thank you very much. And again, if you just go to that link in that survey, let us know what you think, how you want to help us out, how you want to join us. And if you have any other additional questions or anything like that, either let us know by that survey or email us at team@cobbfortransit.org. This video has been recorded and we'll be putting it online. That way people can share it and watch it later. And hopefully everyone enjoyed what they were able to see, and we were informative and helped get across a lot of the initiatives and projects that we're working on. Thank you again, everyone, for spending some time with us, and we hope to hear from you soon.